Please note that the public session of the meeting will be recorded and published online for access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you. I'll now ask Mrs. McBain to take a roll call of members attending today's meeting. If you can confirm your attendance so that there is a clear record for the minutes. Mrs. McBain.
Thank you, Convener. So if you could just indicate that you're present for the recording. So Convener.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Graham.
Present.
Councillor Cormie.
Present.
Councillor Ewell, a substitute for Delaney.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Dunbar.
Present.
Councillor Hendrickson.
Present.
Councillor Lumsden.
Present.
Councillor MacDonald.
Present.
Councillor McClellan.
Present.
Councillor Audrey Nicholl.
Present.
Councillor Radley.
Present.
And Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Okay, thank you. That's the 13 members present.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, before we start into committee business, I just have one announcement to make. I'm very pleased to report that Aberdeen City Council has won the Public Sector Fleet of the Year 2020 Medium to Large Award at the Green Fleet National Awards event in December 2020. This was a new category, and it's not only open to councils but also blue light organisations. This was awarded to Aberdeen City Council in light of their commitment to investment and implementation of alternative fuelled vehicles, the electric and hybrid models that we've taken delivery of, and also our hydrogen technology. This reiterates not only Aberdeen City Council fleets, Aberdeen City Council's fleet are #1 in Scotland from the previous Transport News Awards for Local Authority Fleet Operator of the Year 2020, but now #1 in the UK. So very warm congratulations to everyone involved there. Okay, so that takes us on to committee business. Item 1, urgent business. There are no urgent reports. However, I agreed that a motion would, notice of motion would be added to the agenda, so we'll take that. At item 7, exempt business, are members content that we will take the exempt paper in Councillor McClellan?
Thank you, Convener. I was hoping that, to ask, is it possible to get a bit more information into the public pack, in terms of what the options that we're considering are. I do appreciate that there's a lot of information in the confidential section, which is obviously confidential and couldn't be made public, but if as much information is made public, so the public are aware of what the decisions that we're making are, that would be useful. I'd appreciate a comment from officers on that if possible.
Do we have an officer? Mr. McGowan?
If I can come in on that, thanks, Councillor Convener, and thanks, Councillor McClellan. The details in the report are exempt due to potential detriment and sensitivity, and I think the way the report is framed, it would be an onerous task to pull some of that information out to make that information public. The reason it's been put as exempt is due to potential detriment, for example, in terms of business operations of partners, business operations of ourselves as an organisation, and also commercial sensitivity. So I hope that provides some response to your answers, your questions rather.
Councillor McClellan.
Thanks, Convener. I mean, thank you, Mr. McGowan, for that answer. I think the the issue that I have is that, you know, there's about 10 words in terms of what the recommendation is. It doesn't leave a great deal of, you know, information for the public in terms of what approve option 4 at the appendix. Is it possible that we can expand that at all? Do you know what I mean?
So presumably members through questioning would be able to tease out some of the information. However, I would just remind members to be mindful that there is sensitive information contained within the exempt report, as Mr. McGowan stated. Does that help, Councillor McClellan? You could just be mindful of how you use questions in the open session, and then we'll move onto the exempt report.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you. Are we otherwise content with that?
Agree. Yes.
Convener, I've had my hand up since the previous item.
Sorry, Councillor Yule. I'm trying to get to grips with a new way of hosting meetings.
Thank you, Convener. It was in relation to, you mentioned an emergency notice of motion, which you would take later in the agenda. Are you going to tell us now what it's about, or do we have to just wait with bated breath?
I'm sorry, as Mrs. McBain, is that available to be circulated, or?
Sorry, I never circulated it previous to the meeting, but I can do that now to members, or I can put it in the chat.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so if we could just move on while that's being circulated. Item 3, do we have any declarations of interest from members? No, there are no deputations, so that takes us on to item 5, the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we content to approve that?
Approved.
Agreed.
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 Item 6, the committee business planner. Do we have any questions on that, or are we content to note it?
I've got questions, Convener.
Okay, Councillor Cormie.
Page 11 and page 12, Convener. The first one is item 29, an update on the winter maintenance. Now, over that period, the 4th and the 5th, where we had the black ice in January, I mean, we accepted, you know, the response that we got about the temperatures dropping, and that was acceptable. But the constituents were quite rightly, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that was inundated with queries why there was no sign of any gritters. We all know where our goal priorities are, the routes that they should be on. There was no pathway, small gritters, seen at all on the priority routes. I'll give you an example, north and south, Rosemount Place, which is priority. That hadn't been seen to be done. The road, I don't know if that was normally when the big gritters go down there, they could spread the grit onto the pavements either side. But whether it was the spaces for people that interrupted the cones and that, the grit was not getting onto the pavements. But there was certainly no small gritters seen on these priority routes on the pavements. Was it the lack of staff that we had on top of the temperatures, or is there another reason? Thank you.
This is not a question.
Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Cormie. The temperatures started to drop just after Christmas time, and I can assure the members that we've had full crews out every day since then, both on the gritters and also on the footpath gritters. Members of the public can actually view where the gritters are at any one time. They're all covered by GIS. However, I would suggest probably that most of them are doing their first grits between 4 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock, and thereafter they then move on to the priority 2s. What has been challenging, Councillor, is that a way to describe it basically is that we are resetting every 6 hours, that at the moment it thaws, the water then washes off the salt, and then it freezes over again. So literally we are working flat out, and we're finding that we're back to square one very quickly. It's not where we're having snow that's lying and then the salt gets time to work. It's a lot of it's getting washed off. The other fact that I can tell members is that currently we have used in the last 2.5 weeks 1.5 times the amount of salt that we used for the whole of last winter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Ritchie, for the update. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't done, but normally we would see or hear gritters, you know, they would waken us up at that time of morning sometimes. And certainly the sheltered housing crews were never out. The carers had to around these complexes had to do the gritting themselves. Normally the ground services teams would have been out doing these. This was on the 4th and the 5th of January, and none of the sheltered housing in my ward was done by the grounds team. It was left to the carers.
Excuse me, Convener, a point of order really. Surely members shouldn't be really asking questions about future reports that are a year away. It's not fair for officers surely to be getting asked for reports that haven't been prepared yet. Can we just get some clarity on that, Convener?
Well, Convener, I'm asking if this is going to be the future, if this is going to happen next year as well, because it's very concerning. This is going to happen.
Councillor Cormier, I'm not sure you can ask Mr. Ritchie to look into the future, but I think you've had a response to the point raised.
Well, Convener, can I ask you if this is the future going to be holds for my constituents in the future to expect?
No more than Mr. Ritchie does. I don't have a crystal ball either, so I'm afraid I can't give you any indications as to what the future might hold. You have any further questions, Councillor Connery?
Yeah, it's on page 12 on the smart bins and the digitalization of the waste containers. And I appreciate this is going to be on the big communal bins. But there was a trial done about, I would say, about 3 years ago in the city centre on the litter bins, Union Street and School Hill. And we've never had a service update on that. Is it possible to have a service update on the satisfactory or unsatisfactory way that these sensors worked on these bins?
Do we have someone to Mr. Shaw?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Comey. I'm happy to provide a report on the big belly bins in the city centre. I don't know if the ask is the same in terms of what the waste team are being asked for, but I'm happy to give a report on the bins we have in place in the city centre and also the beachfront, which also has big belly bins in place. So happy to do that. That's easy enough to put in place.
Yeah, thank you. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Just so as not to give you any more work, Mr. Shaw, a service update rather than a report. Councillor Cormie, do you have anything further on the business file?
No, thank you, Convener. That's fine.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Lumsden and Councillor McClellan that I can see.
Sorry, Convener, I just had my hand up to raise the point of order on the last point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lumsden. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Convener. Just a question around number 8 on the planner. I see it's been pushed to the budget setting process. Could we have a sort of the reason around that, please?
Hi, convener. Pam Walker should be here. Or Mark Riley.
Oh, apologies, I lost my connection there. Can I repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Yes, of course. Sorry, it was item 8 on the business planner, the waste strategy. It's going to the budget process, but at the last committee planner in November, it was due to come today, I think. So just wondering for the reasoning why it's going to the budget setting process and obviously not today's agenda.
Yeah, so there was quite a bit of discussion over the process for the waste strategy and how it would be treated. And so it has been agreed that it will be part of the commissioning intentions report that will come to full council. I think that the view was that because of the nature of what was in the waste strategy and the future direction, that was the best way to move that forward. Following that, if that gets agreement, there will then be an implementation plan that will be developed that will also go for approval, which will have more detail on what the future plans are.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Thank you.
Convener, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. Any further questions on the business planner from anyone? No. Thank you. Happy to note that then.
Agreed.
Agreed. So that takes them to item 7, where we will take the notice of motion by Councillor Nicholl. Have we had that circulated?
Yes, convener. We've emailed it out and it should also be in the meeting chat, and we'll also just display it on the screen within a few minutes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Has everyone received that and had an opportunity to look through it? Mr. Booth, your hands up.
Convener, I know it's unusual for an officer to come in at this point. Given you've accepted this as an urgent report and it's a current issue, I wonder if a verbal update on the situation would be helpful for members, and I'd be happy to provide that if you would like.
Yes, Mr. Booth, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
So just to give the background to the Balnagas Energy Centre, that provides district heating to a number of tower blocks in the Tory area. The Balnagas Energy Centre has a couple of issues where there's backup supplies to deal with peak demand. So one of those sites is Provost Hall Court, which on 22nd of December had a failure. So that supply gives backup heat to the Balnagas Energy Centre in times of peak demand. So with the problem around 22nd of December around the additional capacity to the system around peak demand, as I say, what's happened since then is a new boiler was added to the Balnagas Energy Centre, which came online on the 30th of December. During that period from the 24th, where there was a drop in temperature and obviously increased demand, there was about 25 calls to the call centre from 15 different dwellings across 3 different multi-storey buildings, advising that the problem with their hot water. So to give the context of the number of calls, that's there. That new system came on 30th of December. I understand from our partners in Aberdeen Heat and Power that that's dealing with demand currently. We've also instructed another 2 boilers to be added to that system. They'll be installed as soon as they are available. We're anticipating that being the next 2 weeks, which would build in additional resilience to the Balnagas Energy Centre. It was just really to give that update in terms of what's happened on the ground. I'd be happy short term to provide that as a service update along with whatever decisions made about a future report as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Booth. Councillor Nicholl, would you like to say anything in relation to your notice of motion?
Thank you, convener, and thank you for facilitating and taking this motion to committee today. Also, thank you to Mr. Booth for his helpful updated information. I think really the kind of pressing issue here was around the sort of urgent nature, as Mr. Booth has explained, of the situation given where we are at the moment. So I mean, a service update, as far as I'm concerned, would be acceptable. I guess it's maybe open to members sorry, I'm just having some problems with my camera here. There we go. To indicate whether they're in agreement or not, convener.
Apologies, Councillor Nicholl. Well, as it's your motion, if you're content to amend it, and you're happy with that, depending on how other members of the committee view the motion, then that's your right to do so.
Thank you, convener. I mean, at the end of the day, the sort of key issue is really just to seek assurance that any sort of future issues with the energy centre can be resolved timeously, because obviously the length of time that people were without heating and hot water over the festive period was challenging, to say the least. So really all I'm seeking today is that we can that we can get a reassurance that a resolution can be found to this issue, that any future issues can be mitigated. And I think the final point would simply be around what support can be put in place for residents, many of whom I know that members today will know are vulnerable, whether that's through fuel poverty, health conditions, elderly, etc. So what, if any, measures we can put in place to assist with any additional fuel costs that they will have incurred while they were without their heat and hot water supply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if you're content with that as a service update, I think that's what you were saying, providing we get sufficient information back, and then members can take a view on it at that point. Am I reading you correctly? Yes. Is everyone content to agree the motion?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. That takes on to 8. There are no referrals. So item 9.1, the performance report. I'll just ask Mr. Murchie to give a brief introduction to members.
Thanks, convener, and good afternoon, members. I'm happy to introduce the regular performance report. For the committee's previous 2 meetings, we've presented our analysis of service performance in the context of the ongoing but varying COVID-19 restrictions and the impact that that's had on service delivery. So much of the performance report today still reflects some of those circumstances, and in some cases that's likely to remain the case over the next cycle as well. As normal, we've highlighted a number of indicators as exceptions for members. So these are the completion of gas safety checks. So this is an area where performance has historically been at 100%, but a backlog has been created as a result of adhering to restrictions placed on accessing properties during the pandemic. A prioritised programme for clearing that backlog is in place and it's being monitored on a daily basis. Additional resources have been directed to complete that. We've also highlighted housing voids maintenance, and members will be very familiar with that. This relates to the time taken to re-let empty properties. I'd also remind members that as per the Council's performance management framework, a formal improvement project has been established to address performance in this area, and officers have also begun providing regular service updates to the committee to give a more comprehensive update on the improvement activity. Once again, COVID-19 restrictions have impacted on operational arrangements through 2021 for housing voids. We've also highlighted the indicators showing the percentage of tenants satisfied with the standard of their home when moving in. I'd highlight a couple of things on that one. First, the number of new tenants completing that survey is relatively low. Ideally, we'd want to up that number to ensure a representative response. And on that point, officers have begun, as it says in the report, telephone surveys to increase that number. The second point is that it's believed that some of the responses relate to the length of time that new tenants have waited to move in, and that of course circles us back and relates to the improvement activity on voids. A couple more. We've highlighted the percentage of cleaning alerts responded to within time. This one is a fairly new indicator. We're now beginning to see that there's a gap between the target that we've set and the actual performance. So officers are reviewing the reasons why the target hasn't been met, and we believe at least some of that relates to the way that we're categorising the reports in the first place as urgent or immediate. Last thing we've highlighted is the abandonment rate of calls to the IT help desk. So that means the percentage of callers who hang up before the call is answered. Now, whilst the reported percentage is high, the average wait time for answered calls, if you look at the data, is really low. And that suggests that on average, callers who hang up are not waiting long and are most likely reverting to the online self-serve reporting, which is something that we'd actually encourage. And as a bit of extra context, members will know that digital and technology continue to support the largest device refresh that the council has delivered, which is a task that requires considerable resource effort. So those are the 5 areas we've highlighted. Just a tiny point for completeness. There are a few areas we've not explicitly highlighted today, but which have live improvement projects ongoing that have been reported to committee previously. So those are housing tenant arrears, which has seen a rise across Scotland during the pandemic. Street lighting, which we've seen significant improvements for council performance in the last year. Customer inquiries, including freedom of information subject access requests, where significant service redesign is ongoing, and improvement projects on some aspects of sickness absence. So that's my introduction. Thank you, convener. Myself and colleagues would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murchie. Councillor Lumsden.
Thank you, convener. This is a probably a not very fair question to officers, but I'll ask it anyway. It's just in terms of I was thinking voids and repairs about the new regulations about people being able to do work within people's homes. I guess this will have an impact on our void situation and also our repairs, and it's just to find out whether if there's any initial thoughts on that and the impact it will have on the council.
Convener, if I can come in.
Yeah, Mr. McGowan.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Councillor Lumsden. Yeah, I think this is an area that's going to be crucial. It's something that we've always had an impact over the last year in terms of the ability to undertake the void work, and it will no doubt continue to have an impact. We're still trying to understand exactly the impact of the current restrictions on this work, but I would anticipate that we'll be quite severely restricted in terms of the work that we can do. I don't know if Graham Williamson is on the call. He might be able to provide a bit more detail on that for his own staff doing the repair work.
Convener, if I may, it's Mark Riley. Graham's had to drop out for a moment, but I have a response if I may give it.
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Yeah, at the moment, with our methods of working to reflect the current restrictions, we have to have the property remain empty for 72 hours prior to the first visit of any staff that go in. And then the property has to be deep cleaned before we start commencing any work. A maximum of 2 persons allowed in the property at any time, given that they must adhere to the social distancing guidelines. We have to have robust risk assessments and method statements in place with an emphasis on COVID-19 to ensure that all staff remain safe. We keep registers in place to record when staff are in the property so that works can be planned and that we are complying with the social distancing guidelines. This register also is to track and trace any of our staff should they test positive for COVID-19, and also that we don't have too many staff visiting the property at the same time. And what we've also done is increase resources because of this extended process of maintaining voids. We've increased resources into the voids team to try and keep up with the number of voids that are becoming vacant, well, number of properties that are becoming vacant, becoming void. I hope that helps. And what we do all the time is review the way that we're working in lines with current guidelines from both Scottish Government and with the unions with regard to how we are putting our social distancing measures in place to try and make sure that we're effective when we're going into get these properties ready for relet.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Councillor Lumsden, do you have anything?
No, it was just really to thank officers for that answer, convener. It's obviously it is putting an extra burden on the service that you know, I appreciate anyway that, you know, we can't do anything about. So just to thanks for that response.
Thank you. No, I have a number of hands up here, so apologies if I don't get you in order, but I have Councillor Radley.
Thanks, convener. It was just a question regarding page 39 and the performance indicators for looked after children, if that's okay. I've got a couple of questions. The percentages that are there, are they percentage of all looked after children, firstly?
Convener, I'm happy to respond to that if you're happy for me to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. They refer to all of our looked after children, Councillor Radley.
Perfect. I've just got another question, if that's okay. The number of looked after children in kinship care is significantly lower than what is targeted. I'm just looking for a bit more information about what the council are doing to ensure that potential kinship carers are sort of supported in that journey to becoming kinship carers, and you know, understand and feel supported through that process. What's being done in that sort of area to promote kinship care as an option?
Again, Councillor, Convener, through yourself, I'm happy to respond. The figures in front of you this afternoon, Councillor Radley, are the same figures that were presented at the last ODC, and a similar question was asked at that point in time. Following that, we have gone back and we have looked at our data collating around that, and there is an undercounting of our percentage of children who are in a kinship arrangement. So I anticipate that figure will increase in forthcoming reporting when the next quarter is concluded. It's not going to increase significantly. It will increase by about a couple of percentage points, but nonetheless it is significant for that to be noted. What we're clear about, Councillor Radley, is that when a child can no longer live within their birth family, we're always looking to their kin as the first option, and we have over the last year enhanced our support to our kinship carers, and that is something that remains a focus of our interventions going forward, and will continue to be an area where we prioritise resource to. It is really important that we support children and their families to care for children who can't be cared for by their birth parents, where that's possible, to maintain that link with their family and to the communities in which they actually live. So that very much is a focus of our focus, and that is also contained within the local outcome improvement plan, which will be refreshed, and we will continue to no doubt have a focus of that over the course of the coming months as that plan is further developed and refreshed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. I have Councillor Henriksson.
Thank you, convener. You took me by surprise there. I wasn't expecting to be so far up on the list. It's a question on page 43 regarding street lamps. I asked the question a couple of cycles ago about the percentage of LED lamps that have been installed across the city. So I wonder if it'd be possible to get an update on the progress of that. And in addition, whether the lamps are proving to be more reliable, and whether we are actually seeing an improvement in the figures regarding maintenance of those. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. I can take that one. Councillor Henriksson. Thank you. At the end of this financial year, by the end of March, we are hoping to be up to about between 70 and 75% complete for the whole of the city. And as far as the energy is concerned, yes, we are seeing great advantages with the LED. Also as well with regards to the maintenance, because the node points that we've actually got built into the lights actually sends a signal when there's a fault required. But yes, they're far more efficient than the old sodium ones.
Thank you, convener. Just one other question on page 36 regarding the new issue regarding cleaning of community buildings. I was just curious about the categories and how the categories actually what's involved in the categories, because it says that there's been an issue categorizing the incidents, and I just wondered if it'd be possible to have some information as regarding what the categories are. I think I might find it quite useful, depending on whether I have requests from tenants in the tower blocks within my area. Thank you, convener.
Convener, I can take that question if that's
right,
okay.
Mr. Campbell, thank you.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Councillor Henriksson, for your question. So the categories that are used for these reports are the same categories that are used for housing repairs. The decision was taken to use those to save the customer contact centre having to invent new scripts. And yes, just for ease of getting those reports through. An example that I can give about something that was, in our opinion, categorised wrongly was that a fridge that had been left in an area that wasn't causing any great difficulty being put through as an emergency repair, which gave the service 4 hours to respond to. We think that that didn't need to be responded to quite so quickly as that, especially given the current circumstances. So we're working with colleagues to refine those categories to make sure that it gives us a better chance of being able to meet any reports that we get appropriately. Quite happy for all of the categories to be kind of shared with members outside of this, and I can circulate that if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, convener. That would be very helpful to get the categories and getting updates, and that's the ending of my questions, convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, convener. My question, it was touched on by Councillor Henrickson there. On page 43, Mr. Ritchie, the number of street lights completed within 7 days repairs, and it does go back to the LED lights, where there's been big sections, examples of that in Ashgrove 8, Kingsgate 6, Short Loadings 4, Grove Crescent 2, where we have had Tullis has been very helpful in this. And I don't know who's fixing up these lights, if it's contractors or not. But the constituents are coming, the lights are either switched on at half power, and indeed across in Ashgrove, they weren't switched on at all when the scouts went out to see what was going on. And it's taken constituents to come to me for me to go to Tullis and get the thing sorted out. So it was hearing you saying there was something on it triggered something in that light to Tullis, and obviously that's not working.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yeah, Councillor, just to come in on that point, Councillor, the node is actually used for the maintenance side of it once the light is up and running. You're correct that a lot of this work is being done by subcontractors, and it does require some work from us to get the light level set to the correct level. Now, one of the issues that we're having in a number of areas is that members of the public don't like the LED lighting, simply because the old style lighting used to backlight a lot of gardens and areas where they're expecting it still to be done. But the new standards only require us to actually light the footpath and the road.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say, yeah, Mr. Ritchie, and constituents. A lot of my elderly don't like the LED lights, but it would be helpful if the contractor had some sort of form of regulating that lights when they put them in, because with the recent bad weather we've had and the lack of the lights flooding down on the street, it's been a very dangerous situation where they've been very dim. And Tullis has been very helpful in this, Mr. Ritchie. The George Colley's been out, the scouts have been out and rectified the problem. But it would be helpful if the contractors sorted the thing out when they fixed them up. Thank you.
Sorry, just to come back on that, Convener, I should have said previously that the contractor actually can't do that element of the work. It actually requires input from Scottish Power. So obviously they do that once they've got a number of them together. But yes, we'll see if we can get that programming of work done a wee bit better.
Thanks very much. Thank you for your help again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Thanks, Convener. It was on the gas safety checks. I appreciate what's been said already around the impact COVID is having on our services. These numbers have been rising from what it says in the report, in the last report, since about July. And there has been months where work could have been taking place. There's obviously a statutory obligation to complete these safety checks. So I just wonder, what level of work is ongoing to get the numbers under control.
Mr. Booth.
Convener, happy to come in on that. So the figures I have as at this morning are of the 16,700 or so properties that we need to carry out checks on an annual basis. The number outstanding as at today is about 570. That's really been a catch up in numbers where around 2,000 were missed in April and May time. There is a programme in place to catch up with those remaining 500 by the end of March, subject to tenants permitting access for those works to be undertaken. In terms of the stats, it will take a longer period for that to get back to the 100%, because that measures it over the annual period before. So the late checks now will almost take about a year to go through the system, but the team are confident they can catch up with those remaining 570 outstanding checks by the end of this financial year.
Thank you for that, Mr. Booth. That is helpful to know, and I appreciate that the report's perhaps a wee bit more out of date than the numbers you've given. So that's positive to hear. And also, my second question was going to be about how confident you were about getting it done by the end of the financial year, as it sort of intimates in the report. That's good to hear. You're still confident of that, given the current restrictions in place. So that's positive. Thank you for that.
Mr. Booth, just to clarify, presumably that's on the basis of any restrictions not further impacting on the ability to do so.
Convener, I've still to check what might have changed at lunchtime today. Generally, the authority to go in and carry out essential checks, the gas checks would fall within that. The issue is about the reluctance of tenants to allow our contractor in, because at the moment we're still giving them the right of refusal. And obviously, if they have any health issues or are isolating, we can't undertake those works. So we have a plan to meet it, but it's still subject to tenants being comfortable with that.
Thank you. Now, I can see there are hands up, but unfortunately, I can't see who they are. Could you indicate if you're...
Convener, it's Councillor, sorry, Convener, it's Councillor Audrey Nichols got her hand up. Oh, it's gone, it says. And Gordon Graham.
Sorry?
Sorry, Councillor Graham and Councillor Nicholl.
All right, Councillor Graham.
Okay, thanks, Convener. The problem with being last is most of the questions have been answered already, which is fine. It's always about the maintenance, the voids and the gas safety checks is one of them. Other one was on the child, integrated child services, which again has been answered. Can I suggest that similar to the voids and the maintenance, that when we get the figures through from integrated children's services, can we get some information behind the statistics? Because yes, I acknowledge that Graham Simpson stated that after last meeting we got some information. If those were provided following the reports similar to the maintenance, then it would maybe help us and stop us from asking questions.
Through yourself, easy, Councillor Graham. Mr. Simpson.
I'm happy enough to provide that for future reports, Councillor Graham.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. It was just a very quick question. On page 40, there's some information there about child protection case conferences, and I know that we've discussed this at committee in the past. And the figures that have been provided are those that were given last time. It was really just to ask, given the sort of impact of COVID on child wellbeing and child protection reporting, I was wondering if we knew if there was any update and if there had been any change in respect of the child protection case conferences. Thank you.
To yourself, Convener, I'm happy to respond. Thank you, Councillor Nicholl, for your question. Clearly, given the announcement at the start of the year, we have had to move all case conferences to being virtual. Now, we will still look to think about how we can support parents in particular and children to think about how they can contribute to those, and that will be done on a case-by-case basis. Some families are happy to access digitally themselves. Others will need the support of their social worker to enable us to do that. And that support is still permitted within the guidance that the Scottish Government has provided. So case conferences, we will not see any disruption to the delivery of case conferences over the course of the coming weeks and months for as long as this period of lockdown continues. So again, the government have issued new national guidance in relation to child protection, and the responses to those to consult on those are due back next week, and we will respond to that. But again, we're adapting our systems and processes to take account of that new national guidance, recognising that it will be not much change to what has already been published, and that will mean that we would want to propose at the year end for the start of the next year, probably some minor changes to these standards to take account of that and to bring our reporting up to date and consistent with that guidance when it is finalised, Councillor Nicholl.
That's appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. So with no further questions, Mrs. McBain, do we have something to circulate?
Yep. Sorry, convener. We'll just do that right now.
Thank you.
Okay, that has been sent to everybody's emails, and it's also in the chat, and Shireen will display it on our screen in a minute as well.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, members, are we content with agreeing this? Do we have any other suggestions?
Agreed. Great.
We'll take the side. Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, that takes us on to item 10.1, Northern Roads Collaborative. Any questions? Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, convener. I think the only comment I would make would be that I think it would be nice if we minuted our condolences to Councillor Ellen Morton, the former chair, if that would be appropriate.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
Certainly, we can have that added to the minutes. Mrs. McBain, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Are we happy to move on, members? Okay, item 10.2.
Is Councillor McClellan's hand up, or is that from previous? Sorry.
Historic, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to allow Mrs. McBain to set up the next report. It's on the driveway appeal. So if we just take 5 minutes, is that enough, Mrs. McBain?
Yep, I just need to call in Councillor McGregor, so I'll be as quick as I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hello, Simpson.
Hi, Councillor McGregor. It's Lindsay here. We're calling you from the Operational Delivery Committee, so you're in the meeting now.
Thanks very much.
Okay, convener, we're good to go.
No? I'm not hearing anything.
Sorry, Councillor McGregor, we're just holding on for Councillor Wheeler. I think I'm back now.
All right. This is the thing about not having vision.
I know, sorry, it was that we took 5 minutes just to call you in, but it worked quite quick, so that's fine.
Oh, right, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll hand you back to Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks
Okay,
very much.
Councillor McGregor, over to you.
Right, thanks very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers in Vicar Ritson's team who suggested an appeal was to have the way to have this issue decided, because I think democracy in action encourages citizens. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Convener, for allowing me to speak on behalf of my constituent. Now, I would say that we all want to do the best for our families, and Mr. Masson considered that having an enclosed front garden would give his young daughter a safe way of entering and exiting their car and a safe place to play when the car was away. He looked to see what options were available, but it's really unfortunate he didn't contact the council at that stage, for that error has been costly. When his home was constructed in 1975, it seems odd to our eyes that they didn't allow a long enough driveway to park a car in front of the garage. This is not uncommon in these council-built properties, and the result is blocked pavements. Perhaps we didn't think there would ever be the current level of car ownership, but streets like this one are very busy, with cars lining the pavement as well as taking up pavement space, making it difficult for service and emergency vehicles. He lives close to the junction with a main bus route, and finding an alternative parking space nearby is difficult. As time has gone by, rules and policies have changed, so what might have been acceptable once no longer meets the latest standards. And even since this application began, we now have a new Transport Act, making parking on the pavement an offence with limited exceptions. In general, as I understand it, the council does not want to allow more than 5 drop curbstones per property, apart from to allow in and out driveways for houses with a 30-metre frontage or more. Why is this? It is thought to do otherwise inconveniences people with mobility issues. Yet we have new estates with partial pavements leading nowhere, with shared surfaces where people with mobility issues are on the road with cars and vans. To guide visually impaired people, we have lines of dimpled paving, but these are not easy to walk on, especially for those who use a stick, for instance. The worry seems to be that to allow this application would create a precedent, but I wonder if that would really be a problem. Many people cover their gardens in lock block without even thinking of parking cars. The options offered to relocate the lamppost, which prevents a simple extension to existing line of dropped curb, is helpful, but expensive. And the cost is compounded in this case because of the wall he had built to protect his daughter. Nonetheless, would it really cause an unacceptable damage to local life if he were allowed to have either a second section of dropped curb or extend the existing line to allow him to use the gated entrance to the front garden as constructed? This would be of benefit to ACC, removing his car from the street, helping access to what is quite a length of roadway for the refuse collection, fire engines, etc. And I think that nowadays many people with mobility issues who do not have access to a car often choose to have a mobility scooter. So perhaps longer stretches of sloping pavement cause less disruption than we imagine. It's not a law, nor does it happen in every local authority. So we could choose to look at this issue afresh if the council was so minded. What really upsets pedestrians is broken surfaces, where various utility companies have created bumps and potholes with low quality recovering of trenches for pipes and wires. As already stated, officers have been most helpful and are doing a great job in protecting the city and its assets, but I believe there is a case for allowing this appeal. Thank you, Mr. Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGregor. Do we have any questions for officers on this? Councillor Stewart?
Convener, my hand's not up. It might have been up from previous.
All right,
I did take it down,
apologies.
but no. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me.
Councillor MacDonald.
I have a question in the report, convener. Is it a question, first of all, for Mr. McGregor, or is it a question for officers? It is a question for officers, is what I'm trying to say. So, so it's not for Councillor McGregor, and so I just wanted to be clear. Can I ask my question of officers just now?
I believe so. Yes.
Thank you. So my question is about having a look at the map that we were provided with in the report, and not being terribly aware of this area. I just wanted to ask, at that corner between Ballacway and Correnny Circle, how busy is that sort of small junction there, and also just to get a handle from officers on what the parking, are there many driveways along there, or is there a lot of on-street parking in that area? If that could be answered, that would be helpful to me. Thank you.
Hello, convener. I could answer that question if you wish.
Oh yes, Ms. Britton, thank you.
Hi. So the road itself, it goes all the way around and joins back onto Ballacway, and as indicated by the house number there, 100 or so properties along there. So it's not a particularly busy street, and it does have two accesses onto it. The whole area of Dice, there are large areas of Dice with similar housing patterns, and they are generally quite busy with on-street parking. Most of the properties do have an off-street parking provision in the use of a garage.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Can I say that yes, they do have the garage, but there's quite a lot of them have this problem of a short driveway in front of the garage, so there's a lot of pavements blocked by people just parking in front of the garage anyway. So folk with prams and pushchairs often have to go out onto the street. Now that's what the new transport bill's designed to protect, amongst other things. Well, Transport Act as it is now, but the problem, of course, is these people need somewhere to park, and there's certainly a lot more cars than ever there were in 1975. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, convener. Ms. Ritson, in terms of the appeal, if councillors chose to approve it as such, would that have a negative impact on the sort of flow of traffic in the area? Would it, be dangerous in any way?
Ms. Ritson?
There wouldn't be. It's not so much a road safety issue in this instance. It is more the construction of it and the length of time that the curb will be dropped would be extending beyond what we have down in our standards, but what is really desirable for those negotiating the footway. The footway is there to protect the pedestrian, and that would see a reduction in protection for pedestrians.
Okay, thanks for that point. Just in terms of the footway being the protection for the pedestrians, Councillor McGregor mentioned a number of parked cars. Would it be fair to say that, granting this would potentially reduce the number of cars parked on the street, or is there alternatives? It's not an area I'm familiar with, so I'm also going by the pictures, as similarly with Councillor MacDonald. So I'm just trying to get my head around the situation.
What I would say is that there is space for parking on street at that location. Whether that car is sitting out on the street or on a driveway, it's not going to free up space for an alternative car to come in.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Henriksen.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, convener. Just looking at the setup with the cars currently parked at the moment outside the garage for the house. They do seem to extend quite a long way over the footpath, and I noticed that at that point they're actually really close to the junction. So I just wondered if there would be a safety case in allowing this to go ahead and removing at least one car off of the pavement and perhaps clearing the view for pedestrians at that point. Because looking at it, it looks as if a car was parked where they should be parked at the moment in front of the house, in front of the garage, it could restrict view of pedestrians, and it would actually force them onto the pavement. I just wondered if that's something that we could take into consideration.
What I would say is that space in front of the garage is not for parking on. It's access to the garage, and vehicles. We would not encourage or support any vehicles parking on these areas, that because they are then blocking the footway. And as Councillor McGregor has said, the legislation has been reinforced and will be brought into enforcement in the coming year, hopefully, with a few exceptions, but that will help us to be able to enforce vehicles parking on the footway.
Councillor Lumsden.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I just wanted to ask a question around, in the officer recommendations, it says a relaxation of the regulations at this location may set a precedent for future applications and lead to additional requests for appeal. Just to get an idea, has there been other houses, similar houses in the area that have asked for permission to do this, and or is this really a sort of the first request that's come in?
I mean, this is the first one that a solution hasn't been found for, or they haven't accepted the decline of the application. This is the first one we've taken, or has been taken forward as an appeal.
Okay, I'm just trying to think whether there's any, whether other ones have been refused that could potentially then come back and have a legal claim against the council, or is that not really relevant in my thinking?
I would have to check our records. I mean, we get in a large volume of applications. In this particular instance, there is a lighting column that the gentleman has built a specific layout around, and we do advise that people don't construct the layout internally before making the application, so that we can guide them to what our regulations are and we can get a more appropriate layout. So the reason this one has come so far is because of that lighting column and because of the specific layout that's been constructed. That it's a very particular circumstance, but because of the volume of houses within that estate, there could be other circumstances that might need to be taken into account as well.
Okay, and sorry, convener, I have one other question. If the committee gives approval for this today, is that it, or is there, is there planning that it has to go through as well, or is that not something that we would be aware of yet?
Our permission, that's all that's required. They would then go ahead and get a footway crossing.
Okay, it's just, you know, obviously we've seen the wall that's constructed. I just wanted to know whether there was planning had been sought for. It probably doesn't even need planning.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, just on the you know, any future appeals for similar issues, presumably they would be assessed on an individual basis in the same way that you know, we would say that for planning applications, that they're all based on their own merit, and you know, just because one's approved doesn't mean that you know, 3 streets down the next one would be.
Each application is reviewed against the regulations, and we would look for it to fulfil the regulations. What we wouldn't want is every refusal to come back as an appeal, and confusion to reign with the regulations, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. I've got someone else's hand up here.
It's Mr. Ritchie.
Doug. Oh, sorry, Mr. Ritchie.
I think you're on mute, Mr. Ritchie.
Sorry, apologies, convener. Are you happy for me to add to what Vicky said there?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before you do, Mr. Ritchie, I was going to ask if it's possible to get the item up on screen so we could. I'm conscious that, you know, people are talking about it, and while other members may have the opportunity to look at it and speak, I'm trying to also keep an eye on what everyone else is doing. I don't know how possible that would be, Mrs. McBain, if we could bring up the.
Okay, is it the item that you would like on screen?
Yeah, so I think there are diagrams and so on.
If you just give us a few minutes, we'll get that on.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Ritchie.
Thanks, convener. I was just going to add to what Vicky said there, is that, you know, there is a risk here on the precedent, because there is a lot of similar properties, not just in this area, but in other areas of the city. And one of the things that would happen is, if we allow these extensions to happen, is that the footpath basically gets very undulating. So you're going to have just a series of drops, which again makes it very difficult for footpath critters to go along. So I think the committee should you know, bear that in mind as well. And the other point here is that obviously we have given costs to the owner if this was to be approved for having to shift the lighting column.
Sorry, could we just get some further information? So what's the kind of crux of the issue with the lighting column in terms of where it's situated, and if approved, what might happen?
Well, it needs to be shifted from next to the dropped curb. Can't be between 2 dropped curbs. Can't be across a dropped curb.
Sorry, Mr. Ritchie.
Yeah, just to the left of that lighting column is obviously what is the apron in front of the garage. That's not a driveway, it's just an apron. It's about 3 meters, 3.5 meters long. So therefore any car parking on there obviously overhangs the footpath. And then what you would happen is, if we don't move the lighting column, you're left with a very, very small section of not, you know, area of footway that won't be dropped. So it basically would just form this hump in the footway. So in normal circumstances, we ask the property owners to pay for that lighting column to be moved.
And of course, there's the added potential costs of that being damaged. Is that correct? For replacement light. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, members, do we have any further questions on this? No.
Just Doug's hands up. Sorry, Doug, are you?
Oh, sorry, apologies.
Legacy hands.
Okay, do we have any members looking to move anything on this? Councillor McClellan.
Convener, thanks. It was just to ask, could officers outline, is it simply a case of, either approve the recommendations to uphold the decision, or to move to overturn the decision? Is it simple, one or the other? Okay.
Yes, it would be.
Thank you. Councillor Yule.
Thanks, Convener. Could I just ask, would it be competent to move that we instruct officers to have any further discussions with the applicant, or are we beyond that now?
I think we've done that, really.
Do we have anyone that could answer?
I can. We have spoken to the applicant and put the two options to him, and he has continued with the appeal. He didn't want to make that expenditure.
Thank you, Convener.
Sorry, Councillor Yule, would you be proposing that we deferred the matter subject to any further discussion, or?
Not given that answer, Convener, no, I wouldn't.
No, okay. So are we content with the recommendations in the report?
Convener.
Agreed.
Sorry, Convener. Sorry, a further question. Just from on the back of what was said there, is it a case that we overturn it and then the the applicant has to pay the amount, 1,200 or whatever it was? It's obviously a overturn the decision subject to that cost being paid. It's not a case of he gets to not pay it. We are not moving the lamppost for free.
No, nobody's suggesting that.
Ms. Ritson, or?
If the application is declined or the decline is upheld, the householder will have the opportunity to make another application. We wouldn't charge them for that, or take the opportunity to move the lighting column and make adjustments to the site to accommodate a joint driveway as we require by our regulations. If the approval is given by this committee to go ahead with the layout as he would like it, he would then be given permission to create a dropped curb at that location, and he would have to go follow the normal process for that.
Councillor Lamson.
So it's really just to follow up on Councillor McClellan's point there. So if permission was given, would the council then have to move the lamppost?
So sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Lumsden. If it was mooted to approve, then the owner would have to pay all costs involved.
So the owner would still have to pick up the cost of the lamppost, but I thought he wasn't prepared to do that, and that's why we're here. So I'm getting, sorry, Convener, I'm getting slightly confused.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused myself now. Ms. Ritson.
Sorry, if approval is given for a second driveway, the lighting column doesn't need to be removed or moved.
So by approving this, we're removing the need to pay for that to be done?
Yeah, it's providing a second driveway which is not within the regulations, but it's giving something that exceeds the regulations.
Okay, anything further from anyone? Are we content with the recommendations in the report on the basis of what we've heard? Agreed.
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 Excellent. You item 10.3 is small scale traffic management. Any questions? Councillor Yule.
Thanks, convener. Thank you, convener. Since these are both issues I raised on behalf of constituents, I just wanted to say thank you to officers for progressing them. And I think that the compromise on the second of the orders, the Northcote Avenue one, is very sensible and still achieves the junction protection that my constituents are looking for. So just wanted to say thank you to officers for the work done on this so far.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Anyone else? No. Item 10.4, annual report.
Convener, I believe we need to agree the previous item.
Oh yes, sorry. Well, I'm assuming the silence, Councillor Yule, but
agreed.
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 Definitely agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Can we have every single member agree? Or item 10.4, the annual report, the Scottish Commissioner's report. Do we have any questions on this?
Councillor Green.
Sorry. Councillor Yule.
Sorry, convener, it's a historic hand.
Convener, I can agree. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, convener. It's just on page 119, the report from the Roads Commissioner. It says there are, however, still further requirements to be made on late start unplanned works and works awaiting final reinstatement. It is my expectation that the necessary targets are achieved at the end of Q4 2021. Are we confident of meeting those targets?
Hello, convener. It's Kevin Abercrombie. I can answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes,
sorry, thank you, Mr. Abercrombie.
Sorry. Yes, we have met the targets. The Q4 figures have yet to be updated and presented from the Commissioner's office, but the expectation in the letter that was submitted on the 23rd of December was that we had reached the target. So the update that we'll receive probably in the next 2 weeks will just confirm that.
Excellent, thank you for that. Councillor Graham, do you have anything further? Okay, anyone else? Councillor McClellan.
Thanks, convener. Just on that, I think just to thank officers for their work going into that, to see the council removed from the improvement plan, that's obviously good news.
Agreed.
Excellent. We content with this?
Agreed.
Convener, sorry. I pressed the hand into the microphone. I did have a slight amendment to the recommendations, if you would indulge it. It's with officers. It's a very minor. I'm sure everyone would agree.
Yes, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you.
Hi, convener. Do you want me to circulate it just now? That it's just a few lines, or I can just speak it.
could, that would be great.
Okay, we'll circulate it just now. Hold on. Okay, the document's now in the chat and it's also been emailed to all members.
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you for that. Item 10.5, waste and recycling policy review. Any questions? Councillor McClellan?
Sorry, that's a historic hand. I'll take it down. Apologies.
Councillor Yule?
I think that was a historic hand as well, convener. Sorry.
Okay. Third time lucky. Councillor Henriksen?
Thank you, convener. That wasn't a historic hand. Just a couple of questions, if I may. One's regarding the policy on bins that are not correctly used, i.e. wrong materials put in recycling bins and waste put that should go into the normal bin put into the recycling bin. I appreciate that the policy is to inform the owners of those bins and the householders. I just wondered if there was a policy where the householders for some reason take no action. I'm thinking of certain areas within my ward where at various seasonal times the bins are put out. They may well be incorrectly used, so you actually have overfilled bins, you have food and other waste going into the recyclings, and there isn't actually anyone at the property to amend those. I just wonder, convener, if it was possible within the policy to ensure that those bins were cleared if they were left after a certain period.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Convener. I'll answer this question. There is there's a set of procedures that sit behind the policy. So where a household contaminates their recycling bin, they will be informed of that by means of a hanger that's applied to the bin, and they're requested to make, well, if it's severely contaminated, they'll be requested to make changes to the contents, remove the contamination before presenting it again. We do keep the collection crews can record when they've applied one of these tags, so we can actually make some checks to see if there are repeat offenders, so to speak. And where that's the case, we will try and engage with the customers in the first instance to try and get them to change their behaviour. But within we've built into the procedure the option of removing the bin altogether if we need to. But first and foremost, our intention is really to try and educate and engage with customers to change behaviour, because that's the best ultimate option.
Thank you, convener. A follow-on question for that. I'm concerned that, for example, bins are left on the street with food waste in them and all the rest of it. And I appreciate that you try and engage with the owners of those bins, but I am very concerned that that might take some time and not resolve in the bins being cleared and the bins actually sitting there full of waste and actually causing issues for other residents in the street. I wonder if I'm seeking clarification on what would happen if the bin just sits there and how long it would take before we actually go in and remove the bin, just to improve the situation and for public health.
Yes, I mean, where we are alerted to an issue where a bin has been sitting for some time, we will do some investigation around that to try and understand what the cause is for that, and where necessary we will empty the bin, but it will be emptied obviously as general waste then. There are on occasions circumstances where a bin is deemed to be abandoned, and there is a process for that as well. First of all, we will try and find out who the bin belongs to and engage with that customer. But where it becomes apparent that the bin doesn't appear to belong to anyone, we will then remove the bin altogether.
Thank you, Kavina. Yeah, maybe I'm not making myself clear, but I just wonder what the time scale for that would be. Because I appreciate that at certain times of the year, this time of year, it wouldn't be quite so critical as it would be in during the summer. So how long would a bin, would it be acceptable to have a bin that's contaminated sat on the street before we actually take action to remove it?
Currently, that's not built into the, I don't think there's a timescale built into the process. And in part, that's because I guess it depends on someone reporting the fact that a bin has been left for a period of time unemptied. We would seek to act on that as soon as we have the resource available to do it. I would add in normal times when we have staff to actually go out and undertake investigations. So as soon as we get a report in that a bin has been left and it is full and no one appears to be taking responsibility for that, we would seek to investigate that there and then as resources available.
Thank you, Kavina. That's most useful. I have one other question about policy regarding fly tipping. Within my ward, there's an exceptionally large amount of fly tipping associated with communal bins. And I just wondered if there was something that we could do so that the waste lorries who actually pass these communal bins on a regular basis not actually take action at the time, but actually report the fly tipping so that they could be cleared up relatively quickly. Because I've noticed fly tipping incidentally in my street where I've reported it, but I have noticed that over the Christmas period trucks have gone past and it's still there for a considerable time. And I just wondered if there's anything that we could do to enable the trucks that go around and empty the normal waste, communal waste bins, report the incidents of fly tipping as they go around to ensure that the fly tipping is picked up in a timely manner.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The crews do have the ability to make these reports, and it's my understanding that they do. How quickly that report is then acted on is dependent on us having the resources available to go and remove the offending items.
Thank you, Kavina. That's reassuring because it is a major issue within certain areas of the city, and it's nice to know that we do that. Thank you, Kavina. No further questions.
I would, sorry, if it's okay, can I add something to that? when we changed, moved from Katie Brewster to Alton's, and we started bulking waste for energy from waste. It meant at that time that large items that perhaps could have been collected by the regular crews that empty the bulk bins. Previously, they were able to remove large items during their normal collection day. That has since changed, and because those large items can't be bulked for energy from waste. And I think there's an education gap there, and we're seeking to resolve that, because I think historically people have got used to putting, say, a mattress next to a big bin and having it removed routinely, and that, because that's no longer the case, there's a gap there in terms of public understanding. So we are seeking to improve that and improve that that public knowledge.
Thank you very much for that additional information. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, convener. It was just really to follow on from some of the points that Councillor Hendrickson has been asking about regarding unauthorised waste. The policy document that's included in the papers today provides an outline, in particular on page 133, on this issue. But I'm just wondering if there is some scope for the policy to be sort of further expanded around how we deal with unauthorised waste, rather than just kind of focusing on what we won't do. And I'm just wondering if that would maybe contribute to the kind of education objective that we correctly have within the world of waste and recycling. Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Nicholl. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, convener, if I may just try and explain it a wee bit. I think what I'm trying to say is the policy document is nice and clear, it's concise and to the point. But for example, on page 133, it outlines our approach in relation to excess waste and additional bins. I'm just wondering if there is scope to further expand that guidance or overview to take account of what we will do around unauthorised waste, in addition to what we will not do in relation to unauthorised waste, if that makes sense.
I think are you referring to the actions that will be taken when there is unauthorised waste placed in a bin?
Convener, if I may, yeah, I think what I'm trying to do is sort of fill the guidance gap around what we will do if there is unauthorised waste. The policy makes reference currently to situations where we will not do certain things, i.e. in the main uplift waste items. But obviously that's not a situation that we can leave indefinitely. So it was really about what guidance can we provide for those circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yes, there are a series of procedures that will sit behind the policy, and the reason that they're not included here is my understanding that the processes and procedures shouldn't actually be in this particular document. It shouldn't be within the policy document. They would be available separately in a separate document. So the policy, the procedures do exist, but they're recorded separately.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. I must say that I think the policy document is nice and brief and very clear, but I appreciate that update. Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Ewell.
Thank you, Convener. It's a real hand this time. It's two questions. One is a bit of a daft laddie question, but I've always wondered: can I put bottle tops and screw tops on wine bottles in the mixed recycling bin? But the second one, where there are wheelie bins at blocks of flats, so not where there are bulk bins, but where there's maybe the odd tenement in the street, so the individual households have individual wheelie bins rather than bulk bins, and where there are problems with perhaps a couple of rogue residents treating both brown bins, mixed recycling bins and black bins basically all the same, and shoving all sorts of rubbish literally in all three types. It's obviously difficult to hold a householder to account, because although the individual bins are theoretically, well, they are actually individual householders' bins, in practice, short of putting a padlock on the bins, there's not that much the householders can do to ensure that their antisocial neighbours don't abuse their bins. What do we do in those circumstances?
To answer your thank you, Councillor Ewell. To answer your first question, yes, you can put your bottle tops in your bins. Regards to your second question, that's as you would imagine, more challenging. Yes, sometimes there are circumstances where there is a tenement block where they do have individual bins. We try and engage with all customers as best we can. And we would seek to provide the right guidance as to how to use those bins correctly. We don't always have all the answers, unfortunately. We would seek to, for the better behaving tenants, we would seek to provide advice and guidance for them based on the individual circumstances at the property.
May I come back, Convener? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, first, thank you for the answer to my first question. I'll put my collection of bottle tops and screw tops into the recycling now. Built up a bit over Christmas. On the second point, I mean, yes, I appreciate that, but where we have let's say a brown bin, which is actually not a mixed recycling bin, which is sitting there literally festering with a combination of food and pizza boxes and Lord knows what else, and that's one resident's mixed recycling bin. Do we expect that resident to do the physical sort so that the bin will be uplifted, or will we uplift it and just put it in general waste?
We would
case by case.
It is case by case. If we there may be certain circumstances where when we've engaged with the customer, we may agree to empty it to give them a fresh start. So that does happen from time to time, and we'll give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they can use the bin properly. Where it was to happen again, we would, within our procedures, we do reserve the right to remove the bin altogether after we've demonstrated that we've undertaken all the actions that we can do and provided all the assistance that we can provide to the customer. But that, to my knowledge, that hasn't actually happened. But it is within our procedures to support our staff should they have to do that.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. I felt I should really just point this out. So it is good to actually drill down to look at the finer points in this policy. But the function of the policy is actually to improve the council's compliance in terms of recycling and how they deal with waste. The recycling rates are increasing. It's very high quality, and we're looking at something like, I think it's something like 120,000 households that the service is actually looking after. And I really wanted to commend them. They come out in rain, hail, snow, COVID, and they empty our bins. And I think we shouldn't actually forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Very much appreciated.
Well said. Do we have any further questions on the report at all? No. We happy to agree?
Agree.
Councillor.
Agree.
Agree.
Yep.
Not agreed.
Councillor Yule's put his hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Yule.
I have apologies for not raising this with staff in advance, but I'm something of a last-minute substitute. Would it be competent for me on page 136 to move that we delete the words, the 1 to the 4th line, delete the 6 words, and where a permit is purchased?
Convener, would you like me to respond here?
Yes, if someone could. I don't have the document in front of me at the moment, so yeah, if you could, that would be great.
Okay. The section that this falls under is around the materials that are acceptable in the different bins. And the line is included under what is acceptable and in the food and garden waste bin. And that line has been added to what was the previous policy to align with the fact that there is a requirement for a garden waste permit in order for garden waste to be emptied from a brown bin. Removing it means that there's a contradiction, well, not a contradiction, but it means that it could be interpreted as garden waste can be freely accepted in the brown bin, which currently isn't the case.
Convener, if I may, thank Ms. Holt
Councillor
for that answer. I would be grateful though if I could get an answer either from legal or committee services.
Mr. Ingalls, sorry.
Yes, thank you, convener. A proposed amendment to a policy like this would be competent if it's provided it doesn't bring us into conflict with legislation. And I suppose that's the question. I don't have the detail on that just now, but plainly a policy can be amended providing that the policy you end up with is still legally compliant. But that's something I can't answer just now.
Thank you. However, there would presumably be some significant financial implications in order to do so. We have someone, an officer who can. Oh, maybe while we're waiting, Councillor Lumsden, you had a.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, how could it be competent if Councillor Yule's not identifying where the money would come from for providing the service for free? I think you've that point you were just raising yourself, convener.
All right, Mr. Sherritt, sorry.
Convener, I can come in again.
Ringles.
Yes, there does of course need to be a budget identified.
Okay, well, there isn't at present. So, Councillor Yule, do you have a budget identified for this?
Well, I think rather than go around the houses in this, because I'm just making a point, as you'll appreciate, convener.
No, I fully understand that.
Yeah. Would it be helpful if I moved that we approve the policy with the proviso that we remit the removal of those 6 words to the budget process?
No.
Well, I'm assuming that would be competent, Ms. Ringles, would it?
Yes, but if that could be made also subject to checking for any legal compliance.
Okay. Councillor Yule, do you have a seconder for that?
A very good question.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll be moving the recommendations. Your amendment falls without a seconder. That takes us on to item 10.6.
I'll second. Sorry, my hand was up. Microphone turn on. I'll second Ian Yule's proposal. Formally, though, I have nothing to say on it.
I'm afraid I've moved on to item 10.6, Councillor McClellan. The Child Poverty Action report. Do we have any questions on that? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, convener. It was on page both on page 165 and earlier on 161. It's where it mentions that there's still an information governance obstacle to overcome in those elements, and I just wanted a little bit more information about what the obstacle was around that.
Convener, if you're happy for me to respond.
Mr. McCowan, yes, and actually apologies. I was going to get you to introduce this report, but I'll maybe get you to say a few words after you've answered Councillor MacDonald's question, if that's all right.
Okay. Councillor MacDonald, I'm on the mod.gov version of this. Did you say page 165?
Yeah, well, if you go to page 165, it's the action around healthier, wealthier children, and it mentions that there's still an information governance. And I just wondered if that was why it was amber in that particular instance, and what that obstacle was. And then it did pop up in another of the answers, which I haven't quite got my finger on, but that was also one of the obstacles was around governance, and I just wondered if I could get a little bit more information around that, please.
Yeah, a colleague from NHS Grampian, Tracy Davis, should be on the meeting. I wonder if I can refer to Miss Davis on that specific point. Perhaps not. Perhaps Miss Davis isn't here. Apologies, Councillor MacDonald, I can't answer that point specifically. I think it's to do with NHS governance. I was hoping Ms Davis would have been on the line to answer anything about that. So if you're happy, I can come back to you on that out with the meeting.
Absolutely, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Mr McGowan, I'll let you say a few introductory words now.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, this is the Statutory Child Poverty Action Report covering the year 1920. The evidence that's in the report shows that currently in Aberdeen around 21.5% of children are viewed as being in poverty. And that's reduced from 2016-17 from 22.8%. So evidences that there is progress being made in the city around child poverty, reducing. The national average is 24% for children in poverty, so it demonstrates we're below that average across the country. Evidence is there presented in a range of measures across NHS, but also ourselves as an organisation. This is a joint report, obviously, and community planning partners, and where they've been helping across the city to make that reduction. An important point to note, I think, given what's happened nationally and internationally in the last year, is that this report doesn't reflect any of the actions taken to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. They've all basically happened in the current financial year, with the pandemic really taking hold at the end of March last year. So anything related to COVID will be in the next report for the current financial year, and I think that should be at committee in September, given the terms that it has to be back with committee as soon as practical after the end of the financial year. That seems the best and most likely committee for that to come back, but happy to answer any questions if I can, Convener.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Graham next.
Thanks, Convener. In page 152, a report references towards a fairer Aberdeen that prospers for all 2017 to 20. First of all, where does that report to, progress report to, and is it due to get updated, because we're now moving into 2021? And the other thing that I was wanting to ask, is the requirements of that reflected in the LOIP and reflected in the action plan? I could have checked myself, but I was running out of time.
Yes, thanks. Yes, so yes, that report, there will be a report coming on that, but largely, in fact, completely, the actions that are within that are all taken account of in the LOIP or through this Child Poverty Action Report. That's a report, obviously, from 2017. It was agreed by the Communities, Housing and Infrastructure Committee, as it was, but all the actions have been progressed through a number of different measures, including citywide groups and single service.
Okay, thanks. I probably didn't catch it, Derek. Is it getting updated? Yeah. Did you say it was getting updated?
Well, there hasn't been any agreement to update it as yet, Councillor, and I think that the measures that we have in place through the LOIP and as you've seen, that the range of different measures around poverty that are now being undertaken across the city and by a number of agencies probably account for everything that is included, and probably more than is included in that initial report.
Okay, then that's fine. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. Hello, Mr McGowan. I have a question for you. In the report, it says that currently there are 5,500 children in Aberdeen that are experiencing poverty. I wondered, those children, or that number of children, are those children that would also normally be in receipt of gifts that would come via Instant Neighbour or Somebody Cares or any of the other charities that normally we'd see, just prior to Christmas time? And also, are we sure, given the pandemic and all the constraints that it's put on people, if that is actually an accurate number of children, or is it actually likely to be a higher number of children that are actually in poverty?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Perhaps the last question first. There is probably a high likelihood that that number will have changed. Obviously, as I said in the introduction, this report doesn't take into account the impact of COVID because it's for the previous financial year. But I would suspect that when we come back to committee with the report for the current financial year, I would suspect that number will have changed. But I can't give you an answer on that absolutely right now, Councillor, but that will probably come in due course. In terms of your first point, I couldn't say for definite around the gifts that have been received. I know that citywide we work with a number of agencies, including these charities, but also other charities, for example, CFINE being one of the most prominent, but others as well. I don't know that we would have the means to identify every child linked to one of those charities and every specific gift that is provided and support that is provided for a number of reasons, primarily because not all families who receive that support will necessarily pass their details on. But I would suspect that through a number of means, for example, our own provision of free school meals and others, that the majority of those children will be receiving some support one way or another.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Where I was actually coming from this was whether, you know, the figures are actually higher, so that whether the children, sort of putting the pandemic to the side momentarily, is whether the children that are actually in receipt of, in a generic sense, a gift from CFINE, Somebody Cares, or Instant Neighbour, whatever charity or whichever partner we're working with, that whether they are actually incorporated into that 5,000 or 5,500. I'm really just trying to establish if the figure is actually higher, because obviously it's a very worrying figure. And most certainly as a parent, it doesn't make me feel comfortable that figure is in our city. So I mean, I look forward to hearing the rest of your report when it comes in due course, but it just, you know, it's a question that's probing my mind, but thank you for that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
It was just to say about I've got additional recommendations for the report.
Okay, are we finished with questions? Okay, Mrs. McBain, could we have that?
Yes, we'll just circulate it just now.
Convener, would it be possible to get a few minutes to read this?
Oh, you must have read my mind, Councillor Yule. I was just about to say we'll come back in about 20 minutes or so, so people can have and so on, and an opportunity to
thank you
read through that, if that's okay. So we come back at 4:25, and Mrs. McBain, if we could just suspend the.
Yeah, so sorry, just to let everybody know that the recording will just continue on. So if everybody could just mute their microphones and put their cameras off, that would be appreciated, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, Mr. McBain, do we have everyone back?
Hi, convener. I can see that some of the members are on another call still. Hold on, I'll try.
We'll give them a minute or so.
Yeah, hold on.
Otherwise, we'll have to get started.
Hello.
Hello, Councillor
Convener?
McClellan.
Hi, just to request a little bit longer in terms of working up the final wording of our amended version of the proposed amendment to send over to officers. Won't be too much longer.
Okay,
Convener,
how much longer do you think you're going to require, Councillor McClellan?
5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Then we just take another 5 minutes then.
okay, convener, thank you. I hope we don't end up by having to rush the other items as a result of that. But anyway, thank you.
Let's go.
Okay, I will take in Councillor Dunbar then, if you'd like to move your motion.
Convener, could I ask a question first before we go on?
Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for allowing us that additional time to consider the amendment, the motion. It was just a couple of questions. There's obviously a couple of references to bits of research, and it would be, at 2.5, it would be useful if Councillor Dunbar explained that, what perhaps even could include the research in the motion, because I certainly couldn't find it in that time. Which universities in Edinburgh and Glasgow is it, for example, that have done this study? There's obviously about 6 universities in those cities, and the same as at 2.6. Where is this research? It'd be quite interesting to see where they've warned the Scottish Government. So if she could address that. The other thing I was interested in terms of where it says areas, should it not be the SIMD index areas? But yeah, it'd be useful in.
Well, Councillor McCallum, I'm just going to stop you there, because you will have an opportunity to pick up on those points when if you have something to move yourself, or indeed if we get into debate. So
I appreciate that, Convener. No, thank you for allowing me to ask those questions, though, because it would be useful if Councillor Dunbar addresses them, opposed to me asking them after she's already spoken. So that sure. Was very
well. She'll also have an opportunity to sum up. So, Councillor Yule, do you have something that's pertinent before we start?
Everything I say, Convener, is pertinent, but actually Councillor McClellan beat me to the draw on the questions about the references. I don't doubt that they're true, but it would have been helpful if that information could have been provided. I have a question, and just in terms of the wording of 2.1 and 2.2, and I am trying to be helpful because I'm minded to support this. 2.2 in particular, the commitment is, well, I'm sure that both chief executives are committed, but presumably the commitment is by the organisations and not by the chief executives. And wonderful though they both are, I doubt very much that by themselves they could eradicate child poverty by 2030. So I wonder if maybe Councillor Dunbar could make a wee textual amendment there. But I am genuinely trying to be helpful. But I do look forward to hearing the references on the other points that she includes in our motion.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Councillor Dunbar, I don't know if you would like to respond to Councillor Yule before you start or not. It's entirely up to you.
If there's any additional references required, they can be emailed out after the item.
And I think he had a point on
the point on the chief executives. We can change it to the organisations as opposed to the chief execs.
Okay. Right. Well, I shall let you start in that case.
Okay. Thank you. We know that local government has an important role to play with supporting children's well-being and alleviating poverty. We also know local government supports children's well-being and alleviates poverty by providing a range of high-quality services: housing, education, libraries, social services, the gallery, museums, parks and green spaces. We also know that from before the pandemic that 1 in 4 children in Scotland are growing up in poverty, and it's around 1 in 5 in Aberdeen. The Child Poverty Action Group in Scotland have told us that children who already face a higher risk of poverty have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and will be particularly vulnerable during economic recession. Rising child poverty does not just damage individual children and families, but also damages communities. rising child poverty produces huge costs for society as a whole. It should therefore be of the utmost priority for the Scottish Government that families with children are able to easily access adequate financial support. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation and IPPR Scotland have suggested, even pre-COVID, that just to stop child poverty rising in Scotland requires a doubling of the Scottish child payment to £20 a week. Analysis in 2016 estimated that poverty across the UK results in additional public spending of £69 billion a year, or 20% of the relevant service budgets area: health, education, justice, adult and children's social services and housing. Children who grow up in poverty are more likely to experience chronic ill health, poor mental health, behavioural and emotional problems than their more affluent peers. But poverty has a cost for us all: personal, social, financial for the individual, the family and the communities, but also the whole society and the economy. The failure of the Scottish Government to make full use now of its social security powers to address and prevent rising poverty will have significant long-term cost impacts on public finances. Scottish social security is a key tool in the Scottish Government's toolbox for tackling poverty. If the Scottish Government is to play its full role in ending child poverty and realising the principles agreed for it by the Scottish Parliament, social security must be an absolute priority for investment now. Investment now could save extra spending on much needed public services later when greater poverty has created worse problems. The current Scottish Government have been in power since 2007. They failed to meet their long-term child poverty targets that had been set already for 2020. They were failing to meet them long before the pandemic. If we are serious about tackling child poverty in Scotland, meeting our child poverty targets for 2023 and 2030, the Scottish Government needs to tackle child poverty right now and start by doubling the Scottish child payment. Let's get our priorities right now. We don't need to wait for another independence referendum. Child poverty can be sorted right now. I'd like to move these recommendations.
Secretary.
Convener, Councillor Stewart here. I put my hand up. I'm not sure if you saw it. I would be seconding Councillor Dunbar's motion, and very happy to do so. Would you like me to speak now?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll say Councillor Dunbar has clearly put over the case, but I suppose I maybe put a slightly different and maybe more personal and human dimension, because I always speak from experience. And as a parent, and you are a parent for forever, I feel quite sad, disappointed that we are living in a society where there are so many children in poverty. Councillor Dunbar has clearly identified how many in Aberdeen, and as in the report, as hence my questions with Mr McGowan, 5,500, and if that's just a round figure at the moment, that's far too many children that are in poverty. There is a stigma to poverty, and I think it stays with you throughout your life. And I would most certainly endorse the reports that came from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. You know, they were established in 1904, and their longevity, if nothing else, gives them gravity. Indeed, they were established 16 years before women in 1920 were allowed to own property. So I would most certainly take on board everything that they actually have to say. The reality is we need to ensure that the Scottish Government provides that extra funding for children. And I would actually hope that this shouldn't become a political pawn. Everyone on all sides should realise how important it is that it's children that are actually suffering now. They didn't choose to be born, they didn't choose to come into poverty, but we do, as counsellors in that corporate parenting role, have a responsibility to ensure that all children live well, and not just by the breadline, that they have a good quality of life. And this is not to say or any reflection on their parents. Many parents are actually working now and still find themselves in work poverty. There's hidden poverty. And whilst love and care can help protect children around that poverty, children need food on the table, they need clothes to wear, they be able to compete successfully with their peers. And all that's actually being asked is to ensure that that £20 a week is actually given to them. If they don't get that, then that's not just loss of £20 a week, but it's actually a loss of £1,040 a year. And that's a lot of money to take away from a family that will be struggling, not just in a normal time, but in this pandemic time, where many people have actually had not only their salaries cut, they've had their hours cut. And so often it's people on lower levels of income that are having their salaries and hours cut. And people are struggling. And what I'd also add into that is the £20 is still a significant amount of money, but only if you are able and in a position to shop at shops that might be slightly more competitive. But that doesn't actually allow for everybody to get to those shops. And I'm saying the Aldi's, the Lidl's, the Home Bargains, sometimes they're not also always on a bus route. They're not always, people don't always may have a car or transport to get to these shops. So providing £20 might be to buy in the local Spar, for example, or something that's closer, which will be more expensive. A pair of shoes for a child costs more than £20. Everyone wants to give the children proper shoes, leather shoes, and look after them. So I'm just really appealing, and whilst seconding Councillor Dunbar, appealing to people to find it in a human heart that we must ask the Scottish Government to actually broaden its shoulders and provide that much needed support for children. I don't want to over-politicise things, but it does seem that another independence referendum does seem to be taking more of a priority than putting food on the table and providing some very basic things, not just for the children of Aberdeen, but for the children of Scotland. And most certainly the children of Scotland are our future. And for children to be our future, they have to be well fed and nourished. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor McClellan, you have something to do.
Yes, Convener, I have an amendment to the motion. It's with officers. I'm sure it could be hopefully be circulated.
Okay, we have that circulated.
Thank you, Convener. We'll just get it circulated. I just had sent an email to Councillor McClellan a few minutes ago just with a couple of things, but we can just circulate it as it is just now. Thank you.
Convener, I wonder if we could have a few minutes to read this as well, please, given that it's also a fair length. Not 25 minutes, though.
shall we say, I haven't actually, it's not pinged through to me yet, but shall we say a couple of minutes?
Maybe a little bit more, but maybe 5 perhaps?
4.
No. Yeah, I'll compromise with what convener. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor McClellan, over to you.
Thanks, convener. Just as about housekeeping, I have just sent over a slight change or tweak, or more correcting a mistake in it that Ms. McBain, that it does say beyond permanent at a point. I think in 2.9 it should read permanently, just for clarity. But I'm sure you got the gist of it.
What it meant, yeah.
You know, I think we've got before us a report on child poverty, a very serious and real issue for a number of people in Aberdeen, a number of our constituents, and you know, this is that a hand or this is obviously a very serious matter. So you know, I'm disappointed that there's a lengthy, what is obviously a political amendment. But there still remains a number of points which there's no clarity on, which I did ask for clarity on at the start. You know, we've got no clarity around the research which is being referred to and what that actually means. You know, anyone can cite a bit of research, but you know, what does it actually mean, you know, behind it? You know, at 2.5, there's no explanation. You know, and similarly with 2.6. At 2.7, in terms of the energy company, you know, the administration have not brought forward one to date. You have not done anything on this. So I do question the inclusion around that. But, you know, we heard a lot around the £20 of universal credit. And, you know, I don't think there's any disagreement that an additional £20 of you know, top up of universal credit beyond April would be incredibly welcome and, you know, incredibly useful to families struggling at the minute, particularly in the current circumstances with COVID. You know, there's a lot of assertions that the Scottish Government aren't getting on with the day job. You know, we hear and see the First Minister almost every day getting on with the day job in terms of briefing the country with what's happening with COVID. And, you know, as we've heard, an extra £20 would be useful from the UK Government. You know, the Scottish Government have stepped up to the plate in that regard and provided the Scottish child payment of £10. Okay, it's not the £20 that folk will hopefully also get from universal credit, but, you know, that is an additional £10 for families on low income with, you know, young children. And I understand that there's been it's been reported that 56,000 families have applied and will hopefully receive that additional payment, as well as the other funds available, like the Best Start Grant. You know, I think we can all point to things that could be done better, and bits of research. You know, in terms of some research, which I'm sure will be of interest, the Scottish Fiscal Commission forecast that the Scottish child payment could benefit up to 194,000 families in Scotland. The Scottish Government getting on with a day job and providing for families in these incredibly difficult circumstances. You know, I think this is really just, you know, downright pure politicking ahead of an election, which we always see from the Labour administration as we approach an election. Motions brought forward with little behind them, but politics. And, you know, it is really disappointing that this is what a report on child poverty has become. You know, an opportunity to kick the Scottish Government when we should really be working together to eradicate child poverty in our city. Thank you, convener. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McClellan, and apologies for dropping out there. I momentarily lost my connection.
Well, I start again.
No, you're all right. I think I got the gist of it. Your seconder, please.
Convener, can I be seconder, please?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much. I have to say I'm absolutely staggered and somewhat embarrassed that we're even discussing this motion today that one of our suspended Labour colleagues has brought to committee. Throughout the meeting today, it's been lengthy, but we have been discussing a number of issues where we've really shown quite positive cross-party agreement on a range of important matters, bearing in mind that we are working in the most difficult of circumstances and, importantly, trying to support children in the most challenging of situations. Much of the content of Councillor Dunbar's motion appears to be rather sweeping generalisations, and there's no supporting documentation provided, which is really regrettable and fails to allow scrutiny on this very important issue. Councillor Dunbar has correctly made some cogent and accurate points in her speech. And I know that Councillor Dunbar has a wealth of experience and knowledge behind her. So I find it really quite disappointing that such an important issue, such as child poverty, seems to have been mashed up into a very politically motivated gesture. The Scottish Government record on supporting children through the likes of free school meals, which is currently being extended, closing the attainment gap, early learning and childcare provision, which our administration has currently put on hold, the Scottish Government child payment of £10 per week. These are just some of the important examples of the support being provided within and out with COVID. And in addition to that, we also have the £100 payment before Christmas that was provided for all families receiving school meals. So I come back to the point that rather than discussing this issue and this rather long-winded motion, the discussion that we should be having is how we can best use the support that we are being provided with to support the children in our city. And I consider Councillor McClelland's amendment supports that ambition. So as such, I would ask members to support Councillor McClelland's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Nicholl, and apologies for the sound disruption there. The one thing I would just like to pick up on, and I perhaps misheard what you said, Councillor Nicholl, but it sounded like you suggested that the administration had suspended the early learning and childcare expansion, which I'm sure you wouldn't have wanted to mislead people. However, apologies if I picked you up incorrectly on that.
Convener, I wasn't suggesting that it had been suspended. I was just merely pointing out that obviously during the COVID lockdown, we had put the programme on hold, but I'm fully aware that it will recommence. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we move into debate. Is anyone wishing to enter debate?
Convener, I've submitted a further amendment.
Ah.
Aha.
Could we have that circulated, please, Mrs. McBain?
Sorry, I'm just on it just now. Give me 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, can I check I'm still at a meeting?
Yes,
Well, I can hear you, Gordon.
It's okay.
No, Gordon, you're not here anymore. Go away. Convener, would you like me to speak to my amendment?
You might have dropped out again.
Hello? Councillor Yule, do you have a seconder?
I'm hoping so.
I would like to second to allow Councillor Yule to speak, if that's okay. But I will be voting with the SNP, and I'd like to make my speech following that, if that's okay.
Okay, so Councillor Yule, if you'd like to speak to your amendment.
Convener, can I just
Thank
check?
you, Convener.
A point of order, please, Convener.
Sorry,
I think
could I just ask?
I think if somebody's formally seconded, they can't speak in debate. Is that correct?
That will be correct. Yes, Councillor Lumsden.
Well, it's just that.
I don't think she means she's formally seconded. I think she means she's going to second them and speak in favour of the SNP.
All right. Okay. Understand.
No problem. Sorry.
Councillor Bradley can second and then speak at that point, but you cannot enter debates after that.
Yeah.
You only get one chance to speak, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Councillor Yule.
Yes, and can I start by thanking Councillor Radley for her very kind seconding of my amendment, if not her support. Convener, in the best traditions of Labour Party conferences, I thought I'd try and come up with a composite that we could all agree, although it seems sadly not. And I've tried to take what I would hope that are points that we can all support. Convener, I mean, I get that the administration parties don't like the Scottish Government, and I get that the SNP don't like the UK Government. I have to be honest and say I'm not terribly fond of either myself, but I don't think either government can hold its head up to greatly in terms of how this country, by country you can take it as Scotland or the UK, has dealt with and addressed child poverty in recent years. It is a national shame, the levels of child poverty that the Scotland and the UK have. And neither government should be feeling particularly boastful. I agree substantially with what Councillor Dunbar moved. And I don't disagree hugely with what the SNP moved either. And I thought that I would try and pull something together which addressed that. I think I agree with almost everything that Councillor Dunbar said, and unusually almost everything that Councillor Stewart said. And I don't disagree with my SNP colleagues either. This points of where perhaps I'm different is I've included, if you like, criticism of challenges to both governments. My 2.9 does include reference to the 3 million excluded, which I'm sure all members have heard of. These are people, UK taxpayers, who to date have not received any support from the government in relation to the impact of the pandemic. And obviously, many of those 3 million UK taxpayers will have families and who will have be struggling to support their children. Now perhaps having gone 10 months without any regular income. And I'm aware obviously that both governments have done specific things, but there are still these 3 million people across the UK who are not supported. Now I would hope that we could all agree to encourage the Chancellor to address that. Not that I'm expecting him to listen to us, but you know, we all seem to be agreed that the £20 a week payment should be made permanent. And I certainly agree with the SNP that the furlough period should be further extended. I I'll stop there, convener. I would hope we could all agree on this, because it is an issue that shouldn't be about party politics, and it shouldn't be about yeah-boo. It should be about how do we tackle something which is a national shame and a national disgrace. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Yule. Mr. Radley. Councillor Radley.
Sorry, convener, you dropped out there. I didn't catch what you'd said. Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Yule for allowing me to speak. The Scottish Government has provided, you know, a number of benefits to help child poverty. You know, we're providing the Scottish Child Payment, we provide baby boxes, you know, the carers benefit, which benefits children, you know, the £100 Christmas payment. The big issue that one of the big issues is that Social Security is not fully devolved to Scotland, and you know, the current UK government reserve benefits and enforce poverty-inducing policies such as the 2-child limit, the benefit cap, the 5-week wait for the first payment of universal credit. You know, these payments negatively impact families. You know, the UK government continues their plan to cut the £20 a week increase to universal credit and working tax credit next April, or April coming. You know, and we continue to call on the UK government to keep that increase and extend it to all legacy benefits, including job seekers allowance, employment support allowance, income support. We've also called on the UK government to strengthen support for tenants, increasing local housing allowance rates, suspending shared accommodation rates, scrapping the bedroom tax. You know, the Scottish Government have provided newly self-employed income support for those who were excluded by the first round of support during the pandemic. You know, all of these things have helped families, and I think, you know, the motion is missing that point. I think I'll probably leave it there. You know, it's just disappointing to see the amendment put forward by the Labour administration. You know, we are, the Scottish Government are working to improve child poverty rates. You know, we're trying to get on with our day job, and it's disappointing to see the Labour group bring it back to independence once again. You know, thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Radley. Councillor MacDonald.
Are we in open debate now, convener? Can I?
Yes, Councillor MacDonald, go ahead.
Thank you very much, convener, and thank you very much, Councillor Dunbar, for tabling this motion today. I don't know about anybody else, but one of the real reasons that I came into politics was around the issue of poverty. It's something that I feel quite strongly about, and I really do. I'm really surprised at some of the comments coming from the SNP today about not politicising it. It's extraordinary, in my view. Now, first of all, say a huge thank you to the staff for the report on which this debate has evolved, because there has been an awful lot of work gone into that report and the work behind it, because the staff that we have truly stepped up to the mark over the course of this last year, and we all know that there's still a long way to go in that. But we should be in no doubt, I think, that those who are bearing the brunt of the consequences of the pandemic are our most vulnerable, and our city's children are as much of a concern as the elderly are at this time. So like others, though, I do believe it's all forms and levels of government should come together to address the growing poverty gap that we are probably likely to see when that further report comes back to us, and that we should set up a course to eradicate child poverty just as soon as possible. When Labour was in power in Westminster, it'll come as no surprise to hear that we made huge strides and transforming the lives of millions of people. We abolished the scandal of mass youth employment. We tackled the benefit trap and poverty pay. We made real progress in reducing the number of children and pensioners living in poverty. There's no doubt about that. It is on record. And we also did things, as Councillor DeBar alluded to, around the economic conditions to allow more people to work than ever before. So, we had the national minimum wage and so on. When we were in power in Scotland, in those first 8 years of devolution, we delivered 50,000 or so affordable homes across the country, and we provided central heating to thousands of pensioners. So here at local government level, we too have done amazing things. And the report actually picks up on some of that, because it's not just about the lack of money for food or poor housing or fuel poverty that's at stake here, but it's the poverty of aspiration, it's the poverty of expectation, and even the poverty of opportunity too, that some of the issues that our staff are tackling day in and day out. So Councillor Dunbar is absolutely right that we need to use all the tools in the toolbox that we have, prevent the, holding those people back that can free up something in their lives to pull away from poverty. And progress has in some areas continued. There's no doubt about that, but we have gone backwards in some ways, and it really hit home to me in December when former Prime Minister Gordon Brown said that he didn't expect, and I quote, deepening, mind-destroying, humiliating, grinding poverty to return in his lifetime. And that's what we are witnessing, and we know that has been exacerbated by COVID. There's been some chat about putting in some research, and I noticed that Councillor McLennan did that in his speech as well. And I too had a look when I was thinking about this, about child poverty, and had a look at the Loughborough University. So I'll send you out all a link to that. It's the End Child Poverty Coalition, which is a UK wide institution, but I see that